Good morning and welcome to this first episode of Open Source Espresso, your 15 morning dose of open source. My name is Manuel and I'm the host of this session where we talk about the fact that the vast majority of the global software industry is built on code that someone gave away for free. And behind most of them, surprisingly, a small number of people keep the lights on. Today, I want to unpack what that actually means, what open source is, how companies like Red Hat build a business on it, and what it takes to keep these projects alive. Especially now, when AI is changing who can write code and how fast. Holly Commons has been living this from the inside as a core contributor to the Quarkus. And she is one of the clearest thinkers I know on what Upstream First actually means in practice. Holly, I keep hearing the team Upstream First. For someone who genuinely doesn't know, what is open source and what does it mean to live in the upstream rather than just consume it?
So open source is software where everyone is allowed to read the code and modify the code and then do what they want to do with that modified code. And this unlocks, all sorts of benefits. I mean, it's a bit less clear why this is good for the creators of that code, and I'll come back to this, but it's pretty obvious that as a consumer of this code, it's awesome because you're getting something for free. And that's sort of, really obvious benefit. But then I think for like individual developers and for our industry as a whole as well, there's these massive benefits from doing software this way. So for individuals, so many of us have learned by looking at the code that's out there and honing our skills by seeing really good examples from the open source world. But then that effect gets multiplied for our industry. So we're seeing such huge advancements in software, and a lot of that is really just from standing on the shoulders of giants, because all of the software is available. And so instead of just reinventing the wheel over and over again, which is what we've done in the past with proprietary software, and it's a really wasteful way to do it, we can just build and build instead. And so with Red Hat, we're an open source software company, and there's two principles that, for me personally as an engineer, and I think for all of the other engineers, that we really kind of live and breathe. So the first is that we think it's so important that we're not just skimming off the work of others. So Red Hat is making money from this software. And so, it's only fair that we should be contributing back. And so that means that we have engineers working full-time on these projects. And these open source projects that, maybe get included in Red Hat products, there's Red Hat engineers who are delivering software, delivering features, delivering fixes to those projects. And then
and everything for free, right? So
yeah. And
Red Hat is not selling any license, what is then exactly on the invoice, right? So how does a company gives away code that actually makes money?
Yeah, so let me come back to that, because I just want to sort of say the second part, which is that though that software that the Red Hat engineers are writing, it's available to anyone. So we don't want our contributions to be like locked away behind a firewall or locked away in some proprietary fork. And that's really the sort of the upstream first part, is that Red Hat is contributing, and Red Hat is contributing directly to the upstream. And so then that means that the code we're writing is available to everyone. So then that comes to your question of like, well, wait a minute, if you just give away all the code, where on earth is where's the revenue coming from? And I think this is a really important question to ask, and I think it's one that we should ask all the time. Just sort of digressing slightly from software, there's the thing that, as a consumer of something, as a user of a service, they say, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And so a lot of things that are given away for free are funded by advertising or by selling data. For software, that clearly isn't the model. You consume the software. There's no advertising in there. So then that still leaves the question, okay, well, what's the business model? Where's the revenue? And I think actually, having said, if you're not the product, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, there's a little bit in which that's true for open source, because one of the really big benefits of open source is that everybody can contribute. So these software projects become much stronger because there's so many contributions flowing in from users. But of course, that's not required. That's just a bonus of the model. So So
So
with Red Hat,
is it then good to say like Red Hat is more like a facilitator of open source software projects and making sure like companies can express their requirements?
yeah, that's definitely part of it. So we sometimes talk about the term catalyst. So, trying to take these projects and make them stronger by contributing to them, make them, stronger but by in then, sort of adding some
Mm,
value. And then this is sort of where the money and the invoice part comes in of like, okay, well, what value is Red Hat adding that, we invoice for, that someone would pay for? So as a consumer of one of these things, you can buy a subscription to the Red Hat software. And so what you get for that, it's not the software, because the software is open source. You could just go get the software. But
mm,
you get two really useful things, and there's two bits of value that Red Hat add. One is extended life cycle, because when you have software, you want to apply bug fixes, security fixes to the software. And usually what you'll do is that you'll apply that to the current version of the software, and you'll also apply it to older versions of the software, because not everybody wants to be always upgrading. But it's really expensive, that process of taking these fixes and backporting them to the older versions and then seeing, does the patch even apply cleanly? Does it break
mm,
something else? And so that what we do with Red Hat is we will give extended lifecycle support. So that means that we're taking fixes and applying them further back than the community would. And the community is quite right not to apply it really far
correct.
back because it's so expensive, but Red Hat invests in that.
Mm,
And so then that means that if you want to stay on one of the older versions for stability, you have the bug fixes, you have the security fixes. But then the other sort of side effect of that is another huge bit of value that Red Hat brings, which is that in order to be able to apply fixes to older versions, we have to be able to take any version of software, any older version of the software and all its dependencies, and rebuild them from source. So
mm,
we've sort of built up this engineering capability to build any version, and we build it, in our infrastructure on our secure machines. And so then that means that we've got a secure supply chain. And that's super important, because we're hearing more and more about, these supply chain attacks. And so that ability to take your binaries from a trusted source that have been built in a really clean environment, in a safe environment, that haven't had something awful injected into them,
mm.
super, super important, super valuable.
Understand. So it's about security, it's about like compliance, probably some of the topics.
Yeah,
However, I would
security,
argue,
stability, compliance. Yeah.
yeah, I would, or maybe someone would argue nowadays with AI, right? So everyone can write code, at least everyone thinks they can, right? Like, uh, does this make any open source ecosystem stronger, or does it maybe create new problems to this?
It definitely does create challenges, because anybody can write code, but not everybody can write good code. And so,
Mm,
there's sort of lots of notorious examples of, the code that comes out of some of these systems. It might have bugs, it might have security vulnerabilities. And the work of reviewing that quite large volume of code is, again, another piece of value that, as engineers, I think we're adding to a lot of the projects that we're on, is to sort of still have that quality control. Because when it's your infrastructure, when it's your business, you
mm,
don't want to be taking chances. You want something that is safe and secure. But at a personal level, certainly it does mean that a lot of our work now has shifted to managing this slightly higher volume of code, and managing these pull
yeah.
requests that are coming in, and trying to do that quality control at the upstream level.
It's probably also like a huge organizational challenge, right? So like, can imagine like before if we have like one or two maintainers and then like they need to deal with all the pull requests and so on.
Yeah, it's a real problem. And you mentioned this in your introduction, that some of these really key open source projects just have one or two maintainers,
Mm,
and they were already struggling. And then the volume of AI pull requests has not made their life easier. It has made it harder. So again, this is where, we're sort of trying as Red Hat to say, well, look, we want to be, we don't want to be just sort of siphoning off from the work of these one or two
yeah,
maintainers. We want to be contributing to projects, and contributing to projects in a helpful and valuable way, not just in a here, have 2,000 lines of code, whether you want it or not.
yeah, I see. So, Holly, let me ask you for an engineer listening this little episode here at 8 a.m. in the morning and who wants to improve the health of open source tools, the teams they relies on. What do you say is the single most impactful thing they can do today?
I mean, ultimately, I think open source, it's not the code, it's the people. And the communities that we have are made up of people. And so I think when you're interacting with open source projects, well, first of all, do continue to interact with these projects. We work better and we have something stronger if we coalesce around a few projects rather than fragmenting it to everywhere. But then when you interact with the maintainers of those projects, remember that they are human. They don't want a huge armload of AI slop, and that they don't want abuse as well. Ultimately, again, it's about the way we interact with people, those sort of respectful interactions where hopefully everybody collaborates and everybody learns. And that's what makes our industry stronger. It's what makes all of these communities stronger.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Holly, I guess we have some questions in the channel. Are you ready for it?
Hooray. Yes.
So there's one. I've been using AI to help write code and draft PRs. Where does my responsibility begin and end? When we say contributors should understand what they are submitting, does that still hold if the code wasn't entirely written by me?
Oh, this is such a good question. And I think it's something that a lot of communities are struggling with because this is so new for our industry. And I think a lot of different open source projects have come up with different answers for this, and they're all sort of reasonable. So some projects have a quite strong line that they just won't accept AI contributions at all because they really want you to have that human element, and they want to have the guarantee of the human element. Other projects take the line that I think every project takes the line that you are accountable, you are responsible for that submission. And so ultimately at some point then it's up to you to decide, well, how comfortable am I taking accountability for this code? And typing, I think typing isn't the bottleneck. So I think, certainly I personally feel, that do you have to type every line yourself? No, because that's, that could be wasteful. But you definitely do have to understand the line in a way that you personally would feel confident saying, hey, I am, because some of these open source projects as well, they're used so widely, they're so foundational. So, it's really important that the quality there is high. And on some particularly foundational projects, I think that's why as well, they're taking a slightly stronger line to say, we just, we have to continue having that really strong safeguard of quality, because that's part of the reason why we exist, is to provide this shared foundation, and so it's worth investing in it.
So in the end, I think it still applies the same, right? So the one who submits the PR is accountable for.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the sort of the bottom line.
Good. And there's another one I'm very interested in, because also we are from Red Hat, right? And it's saying like companies say they are open source first all the time, right? Is moving to neutral governance like Common House the only real proof? What stops a company from just doing the right thing without it? And I guess it's because Quarko has recently moved to the Common House Foundation.
Yeah, and quite a few projects have been moving to the Common House Foundation. So my obviously I have personal experience with Quarkus moving. Hibernate has also moved to Common House. Micronaut, I think, has moved to Common House as well. And with Common House, I think what it's really giving you assurance about it's not quite about the sort of the open source first, because a company could be doing quite a lot of proprietary software and also have projects that are open source in Common House. But I think what Common House gives you is an assurance for the future, because the way Common House and many other foundations are structured is that they're a nonprofit, and so there are, I think it's 501c. There's a legal framework in place that says that you can't have something that's a nonprofit and then at some point in the future just go and harvest all its assets for profit. So that means that the projects that are donated to these and the trademarks that are donated to these open source foundations, they can't just then be grabbed back or given away to a company. They have to, even if the structure of Common House changed or something changed like that, it would have to go, the legal framework is that it has to go to another nonprofit. And so then that means that you get really quite, nothing is certain for the future, but it gives you this very strong assurance that you're not going to get like a license rug pull, or you're not, because of course business environments change, business realities change, and so sometimes
Nowadays, right?
licenses,
Every other week something
yeah,
is upside down.
and so it is very natural and possible for companies to change their business model. And what open source gives you is that, or sorry, what the open source foundations like Common House give you is that assurance that that trademark is going to be attached to an open source project going forward.
Thank you so much. Looking at the time, our 15 minutes ends, and we have a couple of more questions we will post after the event on social media on our platform. But thanks so much. Holly, was very interesting, and I hope you enjoyed your espresso.